For those of you who I haven't had the privilege of meeting, I am Kaylee Wright, and I'm currently a student management support TOSA, which is a mouthful, in the Gresham Barlow School District. And I work at Deep Creek Damascus. So a little bit about my background. I started working in education back around 2008, and I was hired as a behavior support educational assistant. Did that for about 4 years while I started my teaching program. From there, I taught my first year in Lincoln City, which is why I love coming back here so much. Taught elementary for 5 years, was in the need for a change. So I took the opportunity to go work at Dexter McCarty, which is in Gresham Barlow. I spent there 2 years as a language arts teacher, looped actually with those kids, which was fantastic. And then the year of COVID, I ended up being hired as a technology coach, which was both a blessing and a curse. It was wonderful because now we were all sort of forced into a world where we needed to use technology, but a curse in that I became tech support as opposed to instructional support, which was kind of a challenge for me. So I decided to get my administrative license last year, and that has brought me to my current position where I'm working as a student management specialist, which is basically a fancy way of saying I'm a dean of students. So that's where I'm currently at. My background is pretty heavily focused on instructional technology, and that's just kind of I like to blame that on my dad. My dad has worked in the world of computers for a long time and has just kind of inspired me to want to engage kids as many ways as possible. And I like to utilize technology for that purpose. So what you'll see today is pretty heavily tech focused, but it doesn't mean that it can't be adapted for good old fashioned paper and pencil. And we'll talk a little bit about that. And I will share out this link in just a little bit in the chat so that everyone can see. So I have kind of two main templates I want to share with you guys and strategies, and then an example that I want to share. And then we'll have some time to maybe kind of play around and ask questions and all that good stuff. So the reason I decided to focus on vocabulary was actually I've been subbing quite a bit recently in my role. We have had some absences that I ended up filling for, which has been it's been, again, like, I guess, blessing and curse, right? Like, it's hard to have to step away from my job, but it's been super great in terms of being able to stay relevant in the classroom and to still be able to connect with kids and provide instruction. So I remember, I think the last in-person conference OSLA had, I got the privilege, as hopefully some of you did, to hear from Zaretta Hammond. And I remember her talking specifically about vocabulary instruction and how if we hadn't already moved away from the idea of that kind of flashcard style drill and kill in terms of vocabulary, we definitely needed to now, which had me sort of looking at what vocabulary strategies I was using within my classroom. And now when I go to sub, especially if it's a last minute sub situation, I have to be ready with things to do. So some of these resources I've actually been able to use with kids to kind of help keep me as a relevant and engaging sub, which can be a challenge sometimes even in our own building. So the first one I want to share is this one that's called a tip chart. So this one you may have seen before, but the tip chart, the acronym is pretty self-explanatory based on this image. And I do have this in a Google slide, which you'll have access to all of these things. So you simply are taking the word you're wanting students to define. They're putting in information that helps to describe that word. I like that it's not called a definition because we're moving away from just going into a dictionary and finding the definition and pasting it in there. this is a good chance for them to be able to put it into their own words so that when they're recalling that information, it's recalled from their own language. And then the last is a picture, which I especially love for students who are maybe learning a second language, or for students who might have some reading goals that they're working on. It gives them an opportunity to associate a visual image with that word. When I share this out, you will also have access to, because this is not something that I created, it's something that I stumbled upon and thought was a great resource. This one as well, you'll have a video that'll kind of break that down, which is great if you're looking for an opportunity to do a flipped learning lesson, which is where you could share that video with students first and let them watch it and then give them the opportunity to fill in that graphic organizer. So that's a super fun one. And so there's an example in here. For example, unfortunately, I didn't pick this example. It feels a little timely though, given the fact that we have midterms coming up. But so we have the term is democracy, and the information that this student picked for this particular one, I'm going to resize some screen so I can see everything, is when people vote for governing officials. And then the picture they put in was a picture of somebody putting a ballot going into a box. And so what I've often done with this is our learning management system is Canvas. So I will assign these to students in Canvas, and I will write the words that I want on the board. Sometimes I might scaffold it, and I will go ahead and pre-type those words in for kids. And then it gives me also a good opportunity to teach them some tech skills by showing them how to be able to insert those pictures. And then what I especially love is that for some of my students who maybe need that sort of, I guess, kinesthetic piece, I will print these after they've completed them so that they have that hard copy somewhere as well. And also, this is a good chance for students to be able to collaborate as well. So sometimes, depending on the age group, you might actually divide up these assignments and assign, each member of that little group to do a little piece and work together to create what the completed graphic organizer would include. So that is the first little strategy I want to share. Any questions on that one specifically? I can't see everybody, so just unmute if you do. I'm really quick going to take the chance to copy the link for this so that you guys can look at my presentation. I mentioned before you all started joining that I'm become a little bit more bougie, and so my presentation is actually created in Canva. So you will get the link, and I don't think you need to actually be able to have an account to look at it, but you should still be able to look at it.
I do have a question.
Yeah.
Hi. Thanks for doing this. I know you said there's a video attached to this that kind of sets up, what you do before, during, and after, I imagine. But can you just give us like a snippet of like, how do you actually set this up, and then how do you carry forward to really give the kids, reinforcement opportunities?
So the way I've used this most recently is we're using Wonders curriculum for our elementary students, and they come out with your big chunk of vocabulary words at the beginning of the unit. So typically I will roll this out with words that they already know, because I want it to be a demonstration in the practice as opposed to the actual learning of those new words the first time. So I will self-select some words that I feel like that as a group they already know, and I put those down in that term category. And then what I like to do is I like to have them work together to try to figure out that definition on their own first. And then if they have not filled in that, because they're like, I don't know what that word means, or, they think this, whatever, that's when I start training them on using a dictionary online. Because we actually are it's hard pressed to find hard copies of dictionaries nowadays anyways. But I will have them go in and look online. And I do have a couple of like approved sites that I encourage them to use that are dictionaries, so they're not going off into like Wikipedia land and, you know, getting the wrong definition from somewhere else. So I do have that kind of pre-taught, like, these are safe websites. These are websites we don't, you know, use because everyone has ability to edit them. And then that's where we go into picture, because picture to me as well is not necessarily about what I, as the teacher, thinks should go there. It's about a picture that is going to help them remember, an icon that'll help them remember. So we talk about like the word snow, for example. If we put the word snow in there, what's a picture that would help me to remember what the word snow means? Well, not necessarily a picture of just white, because that's not going to tell me much, but maybe I would have pictures with trees and on top of it would be snow. So we talk about, you know, of the fact that like each person in a group, if they're working, could have like a different picture if it makes sense to them. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, the thing because I work with ELL students, so just trying to give them opportunities to practice and also use it correctly as far as syntactically.
Yes.
They tend to just kind of put it somewhere in a sentence and it makes no sense.
Agreed. And the other thing you could absolutely do as well is, in terms of that information category, that could also be an opportunity for them to put it into a sentence underneath that definition. That definitely could be a place, or you could even just add a separate, you could it could be a tips. So that S could be added to the end for sentence, right? That could totally make sense. I actually, one of the examples I have next, or after the virtual word wall, is one that I've used with a student who's ELD. And so hopefully that will also give you another idea as well. So the next one I wanted to share, and this one is one, so when I first started teaching, had like my giant word wall up, which was fantastic, great. Mm-hmm. And then over time, I realized it was super unhelpful for kids because they would have to get up and walk over to the word wall. And I didn't want traveling around my room the whole day. So then I transitioned to giving them a word wall within their notebooks. And they would just have like a grid in their notebooks. You know, each little box had its little, letter, and then they would write down the words. But that wasn't necessarily giving them any vocabulary instruction. That was just simply giving them a place to record words so they would spell them correctly. So that kind of morphed into, well, how do I create a word wall that students can access that will give them the information that I actually want them to have? So I follow this wonderful educator who actually happens to, I don't know if she still is. I know she was for a long time. She was an ELD teacher. Her name is Esther Park. I follow her on Twitter, which, if you're on Twitter and you are looking for some good resources, she is phenomenal. I am constantly going to her website and looking at some of the things she does. But she created this virtual word wall, which I love. And she has all kinds of different versions, which I love. Now, the way I set this up is, of course, I want my word to go in there as well. So I'll use, by the way, I get like anxious typing. So I'm like terrified I'll misspell words whenever I start typing in front of people. It's the same with posters. If I make posters, I'm terrified of misspelling words. It is the most bizarre issue to deal with when you're a language arts teacher. So let's say our word is democracy. And again, like, I can insert my image here, but what I love about this virtual word wall, because I can insert my image, I can insert my definition as well, and I can just duplicate this and have as many pages as I need. This also is an opportunity to be able to use some of those extensions in Chrome that allows you to actually record the word. So if you haven't ever heard of Mote before, Mote is the one that I use most often. And Mote actually allows you to record information, and then you can just insert it, which I'll show you on the next one. So that way my virtual word wall now becomes interactive. So now I have the opportunity to record, or a student in this case, record a word or a definition, so they can go back and play that anytime that they need to hear that word or that definition again. And there's different variations. Like this one to me looks more, because it is a lot more words, would be more like probably my upper elementary kiddos, 4th, 5th, 6th, up through 8th, I could even see. This one is a lot more toned down, so probably more of my primary 2, 3s. And then there is some scaffolding. So this one actually is where you have the opportunity to record those words ahead of time for your students. If again, like flipped learning, this could be a great opportunity. You can record, and I just have that little extension. You see it right here. So it's an extension that I start on Chrome, and I just record this word, and I can drag the little icon down here. And then when my students come through and start to listen to them, they can use that same extension to record that sound for themselves, which is a good chance for you to be able to listen to some of the fluency skills of students as well. I know we're focusing on vocabulary, but it would be a good chance for students to practice fluency, and then it would be a great assessment tool as well. But it could also be for definitions. So having them listen to a definition and then record it in their own words, or maybe that that record is actually of them using it in a sentence. So maybe you have the word and they've filled in that definition. They can listen to that word and that definition, and then you have them record themselves using it in a sentence. So lots of super great options. I'm going to check the chat really fast. So the Mote extension, and Anna, since you're in Gresham Barlow, I'm pretty sure that Gresham Barlow, it's already an approved extension. So if they don't already have it, they can easily get it because it's an extension. So they should just be able to add it. I feel like it was something that was pushed out for everyone, but don't quote me on that because I do not remember. But I do know it's one of the approved ones.
Sorry. I use it, and when I give a quiz on Google Forms, I almost always speak the questions.
Yes.
But there is a time limit for the free one.
Yes.
Yeah. I'll let you know you run out of free Mote.
Yeah. Yes, definitely. There is some other, we could get into the weeds of instructional tech, because there are some other, like, screen recording options and things like that if you wanted to. So are there questions on the virtual word wall at all? Or comments too is totally fine. Okay. So this next one I want to show is one that I actually, I did just here recently. So we had a student who came over to our school from, and I'm not sure the school he had attended before, but he is recent. Actually, I believe that the student came from Canada. But the student who moved in was speaking very little English when we initially got them, and very fluent in Ukrainian. We are super fortunate that we have a music teacher who is fluent in Ukrainian, who also happens to be married to the district translator for Ukrainian. So I was able to get this done like really fast, and I appreciate it. So this little friend is a first grader, and our first grader, I needed a way to be able to communicate back and forth with that first grader. And also at the same time, it was a good opportunity to be working on some vocabulary instruction. So her and I worked together on this, but I asked for some basic words that I would need that student to be able to have in order to communicate. Excuse me. And then I just started adding in pictures. And then this is an example of using in the extension for Mote that I added in, so I could play it. So for example, I needed my student to be able to say words like break or I needed to be able to have them say words like music class, or library. And then I also, because that student, we were trying to be able to communicate with them about emotions. We did emotions as well. And then what I ended up doing is recording. So that was recorded in his native language. And then I had the word in English for myself. So on my phone, actually, I would pull this up. And if I was trying to communicate with that student, I would show him that picture and play the sound so the student could hear it. And then I would repeat that word in English to try to make that connection, which was super helpful, not just in being able to help with some language skills, but also I think helping that student feel like they had someone there who was making that effort to try to communicate with them in their language, which was, I think, appreciative to him. So I'll play, I don't, let's see. So it's super soft unless you're right up next to it. But all of these were completed in Ukrainian, and I could play them, and then he would say them back to me. And so we just made this for any of the words that we needed for that student to use, which the possibilities are endless for this, for what you could use this for. So that is another, again, that extension Mote is such a game changer for kids in terms of instructional technology. I'm going to go back up to
Kaylee, we have a question in the chat about posting your vocabulary wall on Canvas, or do you share it as a Google Doc?
So because we are working to build capacity for students, I like to have it in Canvas because I like to have it in a place that I know no matter what, kids are always going to be able to find it. Inevitably, somebody loses it in their drive. They can't remember what they titled it. And it just gets kind of muddy. So I like to make sure that I save it in Canvas underneath a specific module title and share it there. And yes, Anna, I completely understand you guys missing her because she is wonderful. So that is kind of what I had planned for today, because I thought maybe if you wanted to spend, sorry, I'm trying to click back around to my, there we go. I wanted to share something. So I am constantly like reading, listening to podcasts, things like that. And I don't know if anybody out there has ever heard of Cult of Pedagogy. It's one of my favorite resources to use. And again, like this is linked in my presentation as well. But there was a podcast done not a super long time ago, it was less than a year ago, by Angela Perry, who gave lots of different examples of ways that you can grow students' vocabulary. So if you're a person who likes to listen, it's her podcast episode as well. But she gives all kinds of different examples, informal conversations, anchored word learning, which in those cases, you could do those word walls on anchor chart paper. You could do those tip charts on anchor chart paper. Kids can be writing them down on those big pieces of paper that, are in the workrooms. She features the tip chart. She also talks about some other ones, Save the Last Word for Me. But this is all in there. It's another super great resource in terms of like getting ideas for ways that we can kind of change the excitement level around vocabulary, if that makes sense. So, all right. I planned for 30 minutes and it was exactly 30 minutes.
Perfect. Are there any additional questions? You've got Kaylee at your fingertips.
Hopefully all the links work too. And if they didn't, just let me know.
Hi, I'm about to have my students read a short novel in ELD class. And it's always the stretch for me to try and figure out which words to feature, which words to, just kind of explain along the way, but not really focus on. Like, what does everybody do? I struggle with this every time because we only read a few novels a year in ELD. But
So one of the things that I remember hearing from Zaretta was that we don't always have to do that instruction separate from them reading the novel. So it doesn't necessarily have to be something you pre-teach. It could be something that as you're coming across those words in reading, that could be the opportunity to stop and pull those words out and talk about them in the moment. Because that can be pretty effective in terms of like retention and comprehension if they are learning about them in the actual context as opposed to like pre-teaching it. Does that make sense?
sure, of course it does. Yeah.
I'm even thinking, because when I would do workshop, I'm talking about like the tier 1, tier 2, tier 3, those very high frequencies and up to 3, but just some different ways to have them move into the book. I mean, without reading it, but maybe give them some timings and find 6 words, either themselves with a partner, but find 6 words that would be words that you see every day. And then I want you to go find 5 words, just flipping, just to get their eyes on the print of some sort. And then, can you and your partner find, 3 words that you've never seen before and you're going to be curious about it, but just some way so that you're not giving them this list, but have them take a look at it. So there's super easy ones. It's like, yeah, we know it. Yay. For those kids. And then one that's looks a little harder. And then one, it's like, you have no idea what it is, because as an adult, there's words I see, I have no idea, but I really want to know. And that just might be a way to let them pull some different words even before you step into doing any of your,
we also used to have vocabulary detectives. So I had vocabulary detectives who, like, if I had put out there words that we were learning ahead of time, or even if there were words that we had already identified that we needed to learn, if they popped up when we were reading and somebody like mentioned, oh yeah, this is one of our vocabulary words, because they were the detective, then there was like an incentive tied to it, because then they were actively looking for those words in that context too. And then it was a great chance to like revisit some of those words, which was really fun. So
yes, well, and Kayla, and then through the word detective, I would have the students be looking for like 3-syllable, if they understood syllable, but who can find 3-syllable words, and then 5-syllable, 7-syllable. And I mean, they're just looking, because then it becomes a contest, especially if you can put them in triads or something, and it just gets them going. And but they are word detectives before you ever do anything.
I also, like, one of my favorite things to teach when I was still working in elementary was always when we would go into like prefixes, suffixes, and looking at like root words and stuff, because that was also really good for that tip chart. So being able to help give them like, oh, this prefix means, not, and then being able to like take a word, break it down, and draw like pictures to go with and stuff like that. I always love doing that too. Because I think it just helped for kids to understand, how to create a definition for words on their own without having to, well, I know that this prefix means on, and I know that this ending means, and then being able to build them together. I always really enjoyed teaching that, because, the moment that they realize like, oh, bicycle is called a bicycle because it's got 2 cycles or wheels. Oh, it's a tricycle because it's and like being able, and then making that connection to math, like, well, why is it called a triangle? What does that root word or that prefix mean? Like those were really fun moments to be able to teach kids, like when they have that, oh, that's right.
Exactly. Thank you.
And then before going into, and again, middle school, but I would just briefly, well, we would look at the title. You're talking about the novel, but the title and maybe a very high level sentence or two. And then I would say, what words do you think we might see in the story, and have them brainstorm? It was really interesting because they would be, then trying to work hard and give me this list, and I would write those on the board. Then of course I'd have an 8th grader who was a smart aleck raise their hand and say, yeah, Mrs. Reed, we might see the word the. And and rather than, but I would say, yes, we might. And so I'd write the word, the up on the board. And then I had them make a chart. And of the 15 or 20 words that they thought that we might see in the story, and some of them were way strange, but then they would put it on a chart. Find a word. And then as we started moving through the story, then they would check them off. But and their eyes were really on the print because they wanted to see if they could find all, it depended on the grade level, but 8th grade,
Sure.
12 words through the book and put a check mark. And at the end, who found them. But anyway, that would be
All right.
Absolutely.
Thanks so much.
just fun and easy.
Yeah.
Something else that I shared with you in the link is just a link in the chat is links to semantic maps, and just using semantic maps for vocabulary and fluency. So there's some opportunities there for you as well to explore.
Yeah, I feel like there's a reason why because I was multiple subjects, obviously, in elementary, and then decided I needed to pick a subject for middle school. And I ended up picking language arts because I loved being able to teach just kids. I loved being able to read stories with kids, and I loved being able to teach them about language and just like the conversations I got to have with them. And I know for me, another thing that was really helpful was especially when we read Ghost Boys, because there were some things in there that came up that I needed kids to have an understanding of the words before we came through. And so we did quite an extensive amount of vocabulary work before we started that story to give them the information they needed to start that book. And it was a lot of pictures, and it was a lot of like trying to tie pictures to the words and putting words into their own definitions and using them in sentences, and then going and finding the words in the book. And then trying to explain. So it was a lot of front loading, but absolutely worth it. So that when they got to reading that story, it gave them that comprehension that they really need. And I think that's like the whole point of me wanting to focus on vocabulary is it just lends itself so importantly to the comprehension of students, them understanding what they're reading and what they're writing, and that importance of them understanding that why, like, it just, it's going to help create stronger readers as we move along. So
Awesome.
other questions or thoughts? So you have access to all of those resources in that slide deck so that you can make copies of things. And I would totally check out Esther Park on Twitter if you haven't already. And then she has a website too. She's amazing because she creates these wonderful Jamboard and Google Slide templates. And all she asks is that you donate money for her to get a cup of coffee. Like, she's amazing. And then Cult of Pedagogy is another like super amazing resource. Anytime I need a strategy or suggestion, I like to go and look at them as well, because she's got a wonderful podcast and she features all kinds of wonderful people. In fact, Zaretta Hammond has been on her podcast as well, and I've listened to a few of her episodes, but wonderful resources. And I mean, I'm by no means an expert. I am an expert at finding other experts, though.
That's important.
Thanks,
Thank you.
everybody.
Thank you.